Blizzard break Diablo 4 again? What's up, Sanctuary Stayers? My name is Mick Diabloface, and today we talk about one thing. Season 11. The new PTR update just dropped, and it's not a small patch. It's an entire relaunch of how Diablo 4 fundamentally works. I've got the full breakdown on the new masterworking, all the class buffs, and the single biggest question. Is your build about to get nuked from orbit, or will it get buffed? Stick around, and let's dive into the details. First, we have Sanctification. Upgrading an affix to a greater affix can now also occur on non-ancestral items. Affixes on ancestral, unique, or mythic unique items can no longer be replaced. Indestructible affix replaced by adding 5 to 25 quality ranks. To sanctify an item, it only needs to have an item power of 750 or higher in torment difficulties rather than being ancestral. Affix ranges have been adjusted across the board. In general, affix values have increased and ranges have been narrowed, and some affixes now have a higher maximum. Additional legendary powers have been added. Now we're moving on to Divine Gifts. So for Indariel, reduced item quality rewards and pre-torment difficulties. For Duriel, we have bonus experience from the Maggots and Helltide has been adjusted. Then for Glyph upgrades now get a scaling chance to grant an extra upgrade attempt based on Divine Gift rank. Rank 1 grants a 25% chance, up to 100% upgrade chance at rank 5. Purified Gifts now grant 2 levels instead of 1. Now, Lesser Evil Invasion. Indariel no longer regenerates health if you die. Indariel's phase transition is now much quicker. The size of Belal's eyeballs has been increased to make them easier to target. Belal's death now takes less time to finish. Shrines no longer disappear when fighting Asmodon. Asmodon has been granted resilience to bring him more in line with otherworld bosses. Lesser Evil in the overworld now reward unique items from layer boss reward pools. Balance updates. So for mythic unique items, we have a Havarion, Spear of Lysander. Lucky hit gain resource reduced from 66% to 22%. I don't understand why they nerfed it even more because no one uses it to begin with that much. And then they're just nerfing it even more so people won't want to use it even more. So I don't understand why Blizzard did this, but they can do whatever they want because they own the company. Melted Heart of Selig. Primary resource generation is reduced to 50%. Damage is dealt to your primary resource before life, and damage taken this way is drastically reduced. Your primary resource is doubled, but maximum life is reduced by 75%. So I think this would be a really good amulet to have for your build if your build does not require primary resource, because then you just have a lot less stuff like that. Yeah. Now we're moving on to Barbarian. So damage per 10 points of strength is increased from 1% to 1.1%. So that's a 10% increase, which is pretty good. And then skills, we have Kick. So width of the hitbox has been doubled. Power Kick. Reverted Fury Cap from the PTR. Leap. We have adjusted attack speed scaling. Enhanced Hammer of the Ancients now increases maximum Fury up to 100. Fury generation per enemy hit increased from 3% to 10% up to 10 stacks. Okay, now we go to items. So, aspect of anger management. So, well above 50 Fury, deal 10 to 30% multiplicative increased damage and gain berserking, but 3 Fury drains per second. Chain Scourge Mail. So, the shorter cooldown for the last brawling skill used before re-enabling all of them now scales based on attack speed. Fields of Crimson. Blood Pool bonus damage no longer only applies to the casting player. For Paragon. So for Hemorrhage and Blood Rage, they both have increased damage from 45% to 60% multiplicative. And then for Carnage, it is increased damage from 30% to 45% multiplicative. Decimator is increased damage from 20 to 25% multiplicative. Flawless Technique is increased critical strike damage from 30 to 45% multiplicative. Has increased damage to injured and healthy from 30% to 45% multiplicative. And then for the Undaunted Glyph, maximum damage reduction from Fortify increases from 10% to 15%. And now for Tempering, we have Berserking Finis. Affixes removed damage while Warcry is active. Arsenal Finis is no longer available. And Weapon Augment removed these 3 affixes. Resource generation with 2-handed bludgeoning weapons. Resource generation with dual-wielded weapons, and resource generation with two-handed slashing weapons. And now moving on to the druid. For skills, we have Stone Burst, so lucky hit chance for the channel damage increased from 2% to 6%. Grizzly Rage, cooldown is reduced from 50 seconds to 35 seconds. And then duration is increased from 10 to 12 seconds. So I think that's going to be pretty good because it's being reduced by 15 seconds and then being increased by 12 seconds. So it's a much better one to use. And then if you stack it enough, you can get permanent. And then damage reduction is increased from 20 to 30%. And at rank 5, cooldown is reduced by 10 seconds. And then for passives, Earth and Light, so damaging against immobilized enemies increased from 15% to 25% multiplicative. Critical strike damage increased from 15% to 20% multiplicative. And then items, Aspect of the Rampaging Werebeast, critical strikes while in Grizzly Rage increase your damage by 3% for 60 seconds, up to 120% multiplicative. Aspect of the Rabid Bear. So they changed the name of this to Aspect of the Rabid Beast, and I think you'll find out why after I read this. So you deal 40 to 80% multiplicative more poison damage, and while shapeshifted, your direct damage is converted into poison damage. And so it's not just for your Grizzly Rage is active, it's now while you're shapeshifted. So Casman Stepwalkers, which are new boots, so damaging 150 to 100 enemies with nature magic skills grants max movement speed and unhindered for 4 to 8 seconds. Enemies you run through are immobilized for 1 second. And affixes, so movement speed affix is replaced with 1 to 2 ranks of Endless Tempest. And now we're moving on to Paragon, and we have Earth and Devastation first. Your Earth skills deal 70% multiplicative increased critical strike damage. Constricting Tendrils deal 40% multiplicative increased damage to poisoned enemies. Lucky hit is nature magic skills have a 40% chance to poison the enemy for 1000% damage over 4 seconds. So every second it'd be 250%, which is still pretty good. Then we have Tempering, so they removed Digitigrade Gate from the Druid motion rule. Oh, and before I forget, since this is my first video, if you're feeling generous, toss a like and a sub my way. Okay, now we're moving on to Necromancer, and for the Book of the Dead, Iron Golem has attack speed increased by 25%, so that's going to be nice. And then skills, Bone Spirit, reverted Essence Cap from the PTR. Passives, Hellbent Commander has removed the requirement for controlling 7 or more minions, which is going to be very nice in my opinion for the triple golem build that is in Season 11, which I'm definitely going to be playing. And then Rathma's Vigor, so timer for overpower reduced from 15 to 10 seconds. Then we have items, Aspect of Shielding Storm, barrier is reduced from 1 to 8% to 1 to 3% of maximum health. Sandquiver Blade of Zur, consuming a corpse now contributes 3 souls to Vampiric Curse, up from 1, and damage bonus increased from 15 to 25% to 20 to 30%. And then Cure's Embrace, damage increased from 40 to 80% to 60 to 120% of weapon damage. Mutilator Plate, Bloodlance damage increased from 10 to 40% to 30 to 60%. Ring of Mandalin, so damage is increased from 520 to 900% to 650 to 1100% of weapon damage. And now Bone Golem's combo attack of 2 swings now counts as a single attack for the purposes of the Ring of Mandalin, rather than 2 separate attacks. And then for Tempering, we removed these 2 affixes from Weapon Automate, the resource generation with 2-handed weapons and resource generation while wielding a shield. And then for Rogue, we have damage scaling per 10 points of dexterity increased from 1.1% to 1.25%. And then for skills, we have improved Flurry, healing reduced from 10% to 6%. We have passives, Siphoning Strikes, healing per rank reduced from 1% to 0.5% of the maximum health. Then we have legendary aspects, where its Trickshot aspect has damage increased from 10 to 30% to 20 to 40%. And then we have Blade Dancer's aspect, so damage increased from 100 to 120% to 100 to 140%. So that's just widening the range that you can have, which is nice. Then we have unique items. So for Beast Fall boots, reverted energy cap from PTR. We have Wind Force, which has a chance to deal triple damage to knock down enemies, increased from 50 to 75% to 50 to 100%. So once again, just widening the range. And then Scoundrel's Kiss, we have bonus damage increased from 35 to 55% to 50 to 70%. Then we have the Death Mask of Nurmtruk, bonus damage increased from 70 to 100 to 70 to 130%. So that's just giving an extra range. Then for Tempering, Rogue Motion has removed the ranks to Stutter Step, and Rogue Persistence is no longer available. Now moving on to the Sorcerer. For enchantments, the teleport enchantment has adjusted the description to specify that it invokes teleport and doesn't cast it. For skills, we have Shimmering Teleport. You gain plus 25% to all resistances for 3 seconds after teleporting. Passives, we have Potent Warding, and so casting a skill grants plus 3% to all resistances and plus 5% resistance to that skill's element for 9 seconds. I hope that this is going to be able to be stacked, because that's going to be good. And then for energy focus, maximum barrier is reduced from 30 to 20% of maximum health protection. Barrier per rank is reduced from 10% to 5% of maximum health. Warmth has healing reduced from 1% to per rank to 0.2% of maximum health. Healing from bosses reduced from 4% to 2% of maximum health. Then we have the legendary aspects. So Aspect of the Mind's Awakening has barrier reduced from 3 to 6% to 1.5 to 3% of maximum health. Then we have Serpentine Aspect, so it has a reverted mana cap from the Season of Infernal Chaos. Aspect of Bounding Conduit, so we have teleport's cooldown reduction increased from 1 to 2.5 to 3 to 4.5 seconds, which is going to be nice. Then Aspect of Biting Cold, so frost skills deal 20 to 30% multiplicative increased damage and have a 40% chance to apply vulnerable for 4 seconds. Unique items. For the Oculus, each enemy hit by teleport increases the damage by 5 to 15% multiplicative and reduces the cooldown by 0.5 seconds of the next cast. Becoming injured will teleport you to a random location. And then Raiment of the Infinite, teleport pulls close enemies to you and grants 10 to 30% damage reduction. And for the fixes, we have ranks to Elemental Ornament replaced with all resistances, and ranks to Shocking Impact replaced with 30 to 40% teleport cooldown reduction. So a lot of teleport cooldown reductions and stuff like that. And then we have Tempering, so Sorcerer Motion has ranks to Conjunction removed. And then Frost Finis has added Frost Critical Strike chance. And then we have Spiritborn. So Skills has Poised Payback, which is reverted Vigor Cap from the PTR. Poised Rushing Claw, which now reduces the time to recharge by 5 seconds. Then we're moving on to passives. We have Fueled, where gain 1 to 181 life on hit while you have at least 4 stacks of Ferocity, depending on your level. Potent is now Jaguar skills deal 6, 12 to 18% multiplicative increased damage to up to 3 of the closest enemies to you. And then we have items, so Aspect of Forest Power, we have barrier reduced from 25 to 15% of maximum health. Then we have Rod of Kipeleke, which has a reverted Vigor Cap from the PTR. Then we have Peacemonger Signet, which is dodge chance changed to dexterity. And now we're moving on to Masterworking. Maximum quality is now 25, up from 20. Maximum quality increases per masterwork is now 2 to 5, up from 1 to 3. Quality upgrades now increase all affix values by 1% per quality value. Fully masterworking item now gives a 50% upgrade to a random affix, which can be a tempering affix. This one will be giving you a 25% increase to all affixes, and then you can get a 50% upgrade to a random, which will be good. And the boosted affix will be colored differently to highlight it. And masterworking costs have been adjusted and scales exponentially with item quality. These are the examples. So item quality 0 is 10 obsite, item quality 5 is 25 obsite, quality 15 is 66 obsite, and quality 25 is 100 obsite. Now moving on to tempering. So there is now a chance a tempered affix gets applied as a greater affix. Resource gain tempering affixes have been added for helms and rings. Resource per second tempering affix added for pants. Adjusted tempering recipes to remove affixes from class-specific manuals that were extraneous due to existing in generic manuals or unused. Then we have class-wide affixes have been adjusted. Natural motion has movement speed changed from 16 to 25% to 15 to 25%. Movement speed after killing an elite is increased from 20 to 22.5% to 25 to 45%, which is a major increase. And then worldly endurance, maximum life is increased from 84 to 141 to 349 to 450. Then natural schemes, thorns increased from 45 to 70 to 211 to 281. Worldly stability, the fixes were added. Casting ultimate skills restores primary resource. Now moving on to toughness. When comparing items, the armor or resistance difference between items will now display as percentage of toughness difference instead of just displaying the armor difference. Toughness is now displayed in the character stats window. Toughness tooltip now breaks down damage resistance per damage type, and torment difficulties now display a recommended toughness amount when selecting difficulty. So miscellaneous, fortify, and barrier generation are now part of the general defensive pool of affixes that can appear on items. Monsters in the open world no longer scale 1-to-1 with their level. It is now offset so that the player scales better than monsters. Monster damage has been reduced at low levels. Monster power has been tuned down slightly in early torment tiers. The base health for boss monsters has been increased. The chance for items with multiple greater affixes to drop has been increased in torment tiers. More items now drop from levels 1 to 15. When in a capstone dungeon, the closest affiliated difficulty is now displayed. Cooldown reduction can now naturally appear on rings, gloves, and shields. Various tuning to capstone dungeon encounters. Various monster and monster pack spawning adjustments. And various other minor updates and tweaks to sanctification and seasonal activities. So that's the breakdown of the facts. The Season 11 PTR changes are truly massive, hitting every major system from itemization to combat. What are your thoughts on this massive Season 11 overhaul? Let me know what you think of all the changes in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in Sanctuary.